Expedition 44 here with Matt and Ryan, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Now, all of our videos are quite strategic in what we're doing and how we're doing them, whether it be part of a series or a one-off or something like this. But this video today has a little bit more to it because it's very foundational to the way that Matt and I think. In fact, whenever I'm kind of starting out with a person, or I call it a reboot oftentimes, of what does the Bible look like, how should the narrative kind of be spelled out, this is what I go back to. This is what I say, if you don't understand this, then you don't get it. And one of my frustrations a lot of times with, I would say, westernized, even American Christianity, is that we get this foundational concept so wrong. And so today, Matt and I, we allude to this over and over and over. And if you watch your videos, you're just going to get this because in almost every video this comes out. But today we're really going to kind of take a step or two back, and we're doing this, again, like I said, strategically for a couple of different reasons.
Yeah, the first reason is right now at our church we launched a 6-week discipleship program. So our senior pastor there and myself were co-teaching, and we each do different topics. So my topic this week was worship, and so we really want our church to kind of have a path that we all walk on, kind of get on the same page, understandings, and grow together in discipleship as believers. It's called Fan to Follower.
Very cool. And then most of you know that Matt and I are also involved with Covenant Evangelical Seminary, and when our students come in, we're looking at what is the core, where do we want them starting that track, and a lot of the students haven't really been thinking this way, and so we want to make a video to say, start thinking this way, start putting the picture together of the narrative so that it looks like this, and as you do that, we think the rest is going to unfold and probably make a whole lot more sense to you than maybe it ever has before. So what are we doing? How do we start this process?
All right, so the topic today is worship. So really, if we define worship by, most of us think of the old English word for worship and the definition that goes with that, meaning worthiness or meritoriousness, and thus giving God the recognition that he deserves because he's worthy. And though that is true, it's not wide enough.
Yeah.
That's a very narrow scope, and worship in the Bible, it's a whole lot more than just giving God the worth that he deserves.
It's all encompassing. Yeah. And we've kind of looked at an evolution of language in a lot of our films and kind of seen that the way that the message was intended for its readers isn't necessarily today the way that a lot of people interpret this. It's like we're interpreting it through our own scope rather than the scope of interpretation that it was originally delivered in.
Yep. So kind of what we're going to do today is go through the what of worship, the why of worship, and the how do we worship. So we're going to hit those three things. And so when we're looking at the what of worship, we kind of have to go through the New Testament and the Old Testament, look at the words that are translated as worship and the context that they're in so that we can get a proper understanding of really what worship meant to an ancient Israelite and ancient Greco-Roman Gentile. So we need to kind of put all of that together. So we're going to take all these puzzle pieces and then try to make a kind of fully orbed view of what worship means in the Bible.
Good.
So our first word is aboda in Hebrew and latreia in Greek. And this is frequently translated as worship. And it's almost always within kind of a temple context.
Yeah. So aboda, you look at that, and we kind of get a humble abode from that. And so you're going to see in English that a lot of these things that we're talking about today, you're going to kind of recognize them even in the Hebrew and Greek words. And I love it when people are speaking and they don't realize it, but they're not only speaking in Hebrew, but they're kind of speaking from a biblical form of that. And so when you talk about that humble abode of home, it actually has this context of service more than anything else. Like home is where the heart is, but it's also where the real work gets done. And so there's tons of word plays in Hebrew. And you've seen me make film after film after this, and this is really hard, Matt, because if you don't understand Hebrew, you just don't get half these or even a third of them. And even when I try to explain them, you're still not going to get them. You'll see people that know Hebrew kind of sitting there in the room when these are read, kind of chuckling to themselves all the time because it's just kind of funny. They're puns. It's good. So in Hebrew, there's kind of a word play, and we see an opposites word play going on a lot. And the idea behind this is that in culture, we're going to see a whole lot of stuff in the biblical narrative that they just accepted. They knew, they understood this stuff. And then what happens is oftentimes the Israelites or God's people or God himself takes these things that they know of in the rest of the culture and he purifies them. He refines them. He makes them his. But those in themselves aren't necessarily refined simply by the words themselves. And so when we're looking at these words, that's what we have to go back to. These words existed, but there's going to be kind of I'm wearing the shirt today, a set apart, a kadosh for them, where they're going to be made godly. And a lot of these are in opposites, and those are my favorites, because what you have going on is you have God taking something out of the culture that is going to be, in some ways, as bad as it gets. And the one, you might remember our Job series, and we're going to get to this, of Barak, you know, something like that, where it's a curse. It's as bad as it gets, yet God, in his essence, takes this idea of curse, and in the scripture, it's a wordplay of taking the very worst and making it beautiful, making it incredible. And so when you get to this word aboda, you kind of see that going on. So it's a service. It's kind of this tillage. It can even mean bondage, yet when it's made the opposite, it's this beautiful thing before the Lord.
Yeah, and then when we get to the Greek word, the latreia there, it basically takes on that Old Testament meaning, and all throughout the New Testament, really, it's an illusion of Christians offering their own bodies as a sacrifice to God. And we get this in Romans 12, verse 1, to offer yourself as a living sacrifice. That's one of the most probably popular verses that's coined for what worship should be, and I agree with it.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
So and so that's the word used there. And then also, we see all throughout the New Testament that we are a royal priesthood.
Yes.
So in 1 Peter 2:5, and then we got in 1 Corinthians 3:16 and 17 that we are the temple of God, and also in Ephesians chapter 2 it talks about that. So there's this context of if we're a living sacrifice and we're the aboda for God.
It's pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing. So that's, I break this down. This is a vocation.
Yeah.
So it's also a place, but it's all about, if you take the priesthood side of it, if we are in Christ, our vocation is to be worshipers.
It's not about us or describing us or anything like that. It's literally who we are.
Yep, it's our job description.
Of us, our job description, our vocation. Now, to get this really in the Old Testament, you kind of have to go back a little bit. And so there's these words you probably never heard before, and it's korveh, korban. And so when you look at aboda, you're going to look at this as kind of a statutory labor system, and that's korveh. And so people often wonder how the Israelites got so enslaved, and this kind of talks about it. So you'll remember, this is beautiful how this works out. It's like a puzzle. You'll remember Jacob is sold into slavery by his brothers, and then he becomes the second in command, and some people would actually, my son was doing a project on a god, and some people actually believe that in their way that him and the person over him both became gods in their society, which is very fitting for that narrative. But anyway, I won't get stuck on that. But what's going to happen is, you might remember that his brothers come in this time of famine and they need food. And so as Joseph is given into slavery, the opposite, in a beautiful way that we really struggle to understand, is that he actually beautifully gave his brothers the chance to also reap the benefits of the rewards of this famine that God prepared Joseph for, to stock up ahead of time. But in order to do so, they owed something. They owed a fifth of everything back to Joseph. And so as his brothers owe that, they in theory actually become slaves to him. So you have this really cool opposites thing going on, how we see the full pendulum. Now, why is this important? Because that's what korveh is. It's this idea that you're going to kind of become enslaved into the system, and it's not necessarily a good word. So later, over time, the Israelites are going to be enslaved to Egypt, and this is how it starts, is that they owe Egypt a work. And so they can never really fully repay this, even though it's a fifth, and eventually they're giving everything back to Egypt. They're completely in bondage and slavery, and there's really nothing good about that word. But then later you're going to kind of see this come in, and we're going to get to this, that this is where the korban goes, is that God comes into his people, and when he rescues them through Moses, he says it's not korveh anymore, but it's korban. It's a different kind of free will giving, of work between being free will and maybe being on the
determinism.
Yeah, it's not really where we're going, although it is affecting that. It's talking about free will giving from the heart, giving from everything that you are, and that when you're giving, that's not slavery like korveh, but it's giving because you want to, because that's essentially who you are.
Good. Yeah, so the next terms that we're going to look at, in Greek, it's proskyneo, and Hebrew is shachah.
Good.
So the Old Testament view of this is to bow down. In the New Testament, it literally means to kiss the ground or to kiss forward.
Yeah.
So it's a posture of when you worship somebody, when you bow, you submit yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a posture of submission, or adoration.
And we see this all the time in the Bible, but I always want to make reference. So to show this to you, let's go back to Joshua chapter 5. That's kind of the first time that it hits you with the brick. And I love it when the Bible hits you with the brick. So we go to chapter 5, and Joshua comes in, it says, and he said, "Nay, but as the captain of the host of the Lord am I now come?" And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and did worship, and say unto him, "What saith my Lord unto his servant?" And the captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, "Loosen the shoes from thy foot, for the place whereon thee standeth is holy." And Joshua did so. And so when you read it in this context, I mean, that is just the utterance of what we're talking about.
Yep.
Of face down, bow down, get flat, completely reverent, take off your sandals. All these words that we use, it's kind of all wrapped up right there. Now, when you look at this word for worship, the word in itself, and I talk about a lot of word plays in Hebrew, and the word itself actually kind of gives us an idea of how to do this. And so the three words that it's used, the description of it in the word play is sheen, and that is the picture that a lot of people, the word itself almost looks like teeth, and it's this idea of consuming, that you eat something. And as you know, in Hebrew, everything kind of comes back to these pictures of the words of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea that you're going to be fully consumed by this. And then the other one is hakf. And that word is going to be to take place or refuge. And that's the second word. And that's often thought of as a sanctuary or where the person goes, the inner room. But the last one is hey, of outstretched arms, or to look, or to pay attention to what's happening. And so the very word itself is kind of a description in Hebrew to actually what it is and what God is asking it to be. Yet very quickly we kind of forget that in our ways of worship.
Yep. So the next concept, so first we talk about vocation. Second, we've talked about submission, bowing down, giving reverence. So the third one is Taseh in Hebrew, in thusia in Greek. It's often associated with sacrifice.
Yeah.
So Old Testament view of it is the thank offering to God.
Yep.
A pleasing aroma to God of giving your best. New Testament also refers to sacrifice, but often it's also sacrificing yourself for the better of others, so giving yourself to others.
Now, in the Hebrew mindset, this is really important because, and we do this as Americans, that we start to think that what we have is who we are. And it's not really the right way of thinking. It goes back to this opposites of thinking. So in the Hebrew mindset, that was the world's way of thinking, that all the stuff that you have is who you are. And it was kind of tied into this retribution principle, that the gods would bless you according to, how good you've been, or how you've honored them, or something like that.
We talk about this a lot with Job.
Yes. And so you see this, and the idea was that all of these things were going to contribute to the way people thought about you, yet the God mindset was to actually do the opposite of that and say, now give them back.
Yep. Give it away. Yep. So we kind of see a little bit of this in the New Testament, Ephesians 5:2, and walk in love, just as Christ loved you and gave himself up, an offering and a sacrifice to God, a fragrant aroma.
Love it.
So, and then Philippians 2:17, but even if I am being poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrifice and service for your faith, I rejoice and share my joy with all of you.
I could talk a long time about drink offerings on sacrifice, but
yeah.
again, it's everything that you have is given back to God, and we're going to work on this. This is a puzzle that all comes together. It's all connected. I just love it how the Bible does this. So, what is worship?
So, putting all these puzzle pieces together that we just talked about in the last 15 minutes or so, worship is vocation. Worship is gratitude and submission. And worship is a sacrifice.
Yes.
So that's kind of, if we define worship, it's those pieces put together as one thing.
And there's so much humility in this. I mean, if you're missing this key of humility, you're not going to have it. But it's kind of putting all your goals, prioritizing your service, who you are, your gratitude, your praise, coming together as a priesthood where God is actually inside of you. You are one of the same, so to speak, but also having this fall on your face reverence at the same time.
Yep. All right, so that is the first part. So now let's move on to the why.
The why.
Why do we worship? I think it can be broken down pretty simply to we worship God because of who he is and because of what he's done.
What he's done, yeah.
Yeah. So if we look at probably the way that God describes himself in the Bible, and this is quoted over 20 times in the Bible, Exodus 34:6, that God is compassionate, he is gracious, he's slow to anger, and abounding in love.
Yeah. And you guys know one of my pet peeves is that our God's name is Yahweh. And most people, you ask the average Christian, what's the name of God? And they just go, God. Well, he's got a whole bunch of names. He's got this name and this name and this name. That's true, but his name is Yahweh, and as he describes himself, as he describes the name of Yahweh, all of these things are not only building the description of God, but the description of the light bearer at the same time.
Yeah. So I think the thing that stands out to me here, and what most people, and in our class we talked about when asked, all right, so why do we worship God? Most people say because of his grace.
Yes.
So,
grace. And I agree with that.
Yes, we do. Now, we often in the West think of this as unmerited favor or the perfect gift.
Yeah. So people think of it as this total blanket thing of, here you go, everything you ever have, I'm going to give you all this stuff. It's a completely untied gift of grace. Take the sailboat, take the yacht, take the car. I don't want anything back. That's what it is, right?
Yeah, and that would have been absolutely crazy to absolutely crazy. All right, so we've talked about this in our gospel series. So we'll recap basically here the three graces.
Yeah.
We call it. So there's a statue, and there's one here in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where we're at, and there's in the park. They were all over the ancient world. It's a statue of these three young women that are dancing in a circle.
Yep.
And it depicted what grace was in the ancient world. Seneca wrote about this, and he talked about the gift giving in the ancient world, describing this statue. And when people saw the statue, it reminded them about what they were supposed to do as a recipient of a gift and as someone who gave gifts.
Now, this is important because we're talking, most of these statues came about first century, but they're depicting something of ancient times. And so they're not just saying that this exists now in a Greco-Roman Empire. They're saying that this has been going on ever since we can remember, from the beginning of time.
Yep. So these three graces represented patron and client relationships. So a patron was someone who had something, and a client was somebody who received a gift from a patron. So if we think of
it's almost a repayment, like a circular relationship.
So it's all about building relationships, and it wasn't about just giving a gift and expecting nothing in return. So when a patron gave a gift, the first grace, that first statue, represented the way that a patron should give a gift.
Yes.
So they should give it without expecting a return.
Right.
So the second one was how the one who receiving the gift should receive the gift.
Yeah.
Which was with gratitude. There was a social expectation for a person receiving a gift to be grateful to the uttermost.
Yeah. It's kind of like when people say, I actually like giving gifts more than getting gifts. And so it's funny, throughout life, your mindset changes this. We have these, we could talk about Christmas and Christian, we won't go there. But anyway, you have all these times in life as a parent that you give your kids things. You give them gifts. And as a kid, you just know you're getting stuff. You can't wait till Christmas because you're getting all this stuff. But at some point, you realize when you go from being a kid to being an adult that it actually wasn't necessarily about the joy of getting as it was
the joy of giving.
Joy of giving.
Yep. So when we look at the third grace, was how what you're supposed to do with the gift.
Yeah.
And basically how you were supposed to respond as a client to your patron.
Yes.
So we receive a gift. That third grace represented that there was an expectation for the receiver of the gift to pay forward the honor back to the patron.
Yes.
So they couldn't ever usually repay the patron in kind, like with the same amount back, ever pay them back, because this gift giving was made to create a relationship. And it's not like, I gave you this, now you got to pay me back. It wasn't a debt thing.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is when you look at these statues, now, there's some famous ones out there that kind of all look the same. Like our one in Lake Geneva looks just like the most common. But there's some different reiterations of this, and you see these going back to, at least as far as the Babylonian exile, which was hundreds of years before the Greco-Roman idea of this picture. So when you look at the Greco-Roman version of it, it's a beautiful dance. It's these three ladies that are kind of entwined with each other, looking like they're there. But what's interesting is in the Hebrew mindset, we go back to this opposites thing. And as much as there's this beautiful dance going, some of the other versions of this statue actually look like a wrestling match. And so there's this idea of pushing and pulling, and you'll look at the facial expressions, and they almost have pain on their face. And you see both of these statues represented sometimes in the same places within the same cultures because of this idea of Hebrew opposites. That at some point what hurts is also going to be maybe the best or what feels good. And we see that often in this way too. And we get to this in the gift giving. We talk about spiritual gifts over and over. And that sometimes the thing that annoys you the most about yourself, the thing that you can't stand about you, your biggest weakness is often what God is going to use as your greatest strength when He is inside of you working within you. And so it's just this puzzle that's amazing of this struggle of the outside world becoming the opposite of the most beautiful thing before the face of God.
Yeah, so this dance, just to kind of summarize, the first grace is about patrons giving gifts. The second one is about us receiving that gift with gratitude. So we think of God giving His Son. We receive that gift of grace with gratitude. And then the third one is, how do you live your life for the honor of the one who gave it to you? So that's what worship is about, and what grace is about is that whole circular dance.
Returning the honor.
So it keeps unfolding upon itself.
So how do we do this? We want to worship, and we get to the how. Like, we have this life that God has not only given us or repurposed or made us new and real and defined who we are as set apart and holy people besides Him, but He's going to kind of tell us exactly how He wants us to do this. And the American mindset of this is very different than what we track when we're just saying, what does the Bible say? We've kind of gotten away from this. We've kind of put this in a box of, we're going to go to church, we're going to give to our neighbor. It's almost like this checklist of making it happen.
We're going to tithe, we're going to pray, we're going to read our Bible. It's like like you said, a checklist. So,
and that's not at all what was meant by it.
It's like, if I do these things, then I'm going to be blessed. Which isn't the mindset.
Deuteronomy 6, you kind of have this Shema, this prayer that traditional Hebrews are going to not only memorize, but they're going to pray, that they're going to live every day this way. And it's essentially love your neighbor, but Jesus kind of tweaks this a little bit.
Yeah, so the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Jesus adds mind, and then He says, and the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself, quoting from Deuteronomy. So
it's beautiful.
It is.
So why? What does that mean? What was Jesus saying in the way that He's kind of building this idea of how we worship as light bearers?
Yeah, so if we look at heart there, it's really talking about the seat of our emotions. So with our emotions, we worship God. So Pastor Michael had a great sermon talking about emotions and how there's emotions that deal with the spirit and emotions that deal with the flesh, and we need to make sure our emotions are in the spirit. And the second thing, when we look at strength, it's the stuff you do. And your mind, you're studying, you're learning, your knowledge, growing in wisdom.
It's funny, whenever my kids lose something, the first thing I say is, stop and think about it. Where did you put it? And they have to, you see them for a second, they almost like close their eyes and go into this meditative stance, and they're actually like just thinking about what happened. Now, today, we are so busy in our culture that this is the one that we hardly do. We hardly stop to think, and that's why church in this culture is really important, because for a lot of people, it's the one time where they come back to a meditative place about letting the Spirit actually work within their mind, of stopping to think about this.
Yep. Now the last part of the Shema that we need to touch on is soul.
Now, Matt, a lot of people, when you say soul, they get this kind of idea of this ancient Greek philosophy of like something leaving me, the Tom and Jerry angel over here, and rising to the heavens or something like this. Is that what this is talking about?
No. So
help us out here.
So that kind of version of the soul came from Plato and the Stoics, and it wasn't the Hebrew mindset of what soul is.
Yeah.
So when we think of soul, the word there is nephesh. And if you've watched any of our videos, you hear us mention this word over and
all the time.
over
Almost
and
every
over.
film.
Yeah. So really,
I would say Matt and I feel like this is in the 5 most important words in the whole Bible.
Mm-hmm. So nephesh. So in English, it carries a lot of baggage, like we said, of immaterial thing. But in the Bible, it really just meant life.
Yeah. If you were going to talk about, this idea of something being trapped inside of you and released at death, again, people would look at you and go,
"You're crazy.
You're nuts. What are you talking about?" Yet every American, that's the way they think of it, know?
So going back to Genesis 1 and 2, when God's creating on the day he creates the beasts of the field and man, they're both called nefeshes.
Yeah. Animals. So we're tied in with animals. How does that work?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? How does that work?
And then when God creates Adam, says that he breathed his breath into Adam and he became a living nephesh.
Yeah. So the words that the Hebrew uses when it has nephesh, there's a whole bunch. There's a spectrum of words, but what it's referring to over and over is living parts of things. That it's the life. You hear sometimes you read into it the gut. Sometimes you read into it an arm or a foot or something like that. And if you don't know the language and if you don't have a concept of this, every time you read the word nephesh, you'd get so frustrated because you can go, how does it mean gut when the last time it just meant, death or that the carcass was thrown into the field,
like the dead nephesh.
Yeah. It wouldn't make sense. You'd get frustrated. But the idea of it is saying that every little thing that is connected to life is also connected spiritually to who you are.
Yeah, and so the root of nephesh just means throat or neck.
Yeah.
So what comes in through your neck, food, sustains your body, so it represents your whole life.
Yes.
So the sustainment of life.
Now what about Greek? It kind of gets connected the same in the New Testament, or in a very similar way.
Yeah, and so we got to think that the majority of New Testament writers had a Hebrew background.
They did,
so though they're speaking and writing in Greek, they're thinking in Hebrew.
And I say this all the time. When you read some of Jesus's puns, some people say, "Oh, Jesus probably spoke Greek because it's written that way," and I look at them like they're nuts because when you read in Greek, a lot of times things don't make sense because it was a Hebrew pun, and so Aramaic would have made sense because Aramaic and Greek were heavily tied, and so Jesus, I think, most of the time was speaking in Aramaic. But even when they said these in the Greek language, people would understand them even if they said them in Greek because the culture understood that was a Hebrew pun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we see in Psalm 42, it's one of the most popular psalms, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul, nephesh, pants after you. So it's our whole life going after God. So when we talk about nephesh and how we worship, what is your life striving for?
Yeah. Every little part of you, everything that you have, everything, and this goes back to the opposites. Everything that's God has given you, there's a rebirth. And so when we think of the rebirth of the soul, that I've been reborn, we hear that a lot of times. The idea that people think of is again this idea of one soul reborn that will, leave my body and rise up into the clouds at some point. But the idea of it is that every part of me needs to be reborn. That the hands that I sinned with are now going to be the hands that I worship with.
And the hands that love my neighbor.
Exactly.
So that's kind of, if we bring it back to the Shema, so love the Lord with all your heart, all your nephesh, all your mind, and all your strength. It's basically the Jews were praying this every day, reminding themselves that the way that we worship God is with everything within us.
Yep. So Psalm 119, a lot of people know that when it says, "Let me live that I might praise you." And when you read that in Hebrew, it literally says, "Let my Nephesh live that it may praise you." And the it has this idea of it's representing a whole bunch of different things, not just a singular part of who you are.
Yep, so every aspect. All right, so the next aspect of how we worship, so first is our whole life, next is first fruits.
And again, this is like the Cliff Notes version of all this stuff, because first fruits, I mean, we could do like a 10-part series just on first fruits.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to keep this in a few minutes and just give you the basics of it.
Yeah, so first place we kind of experience this in the Bible is Cain and Abel.
Yep.
So they both bring offerings to God. It says that Abel brought his best, the first of his offerings, and Cain, it doesn't say that about Cain.
He gave what was left.
It's kind of the indication that Cain gave what was left.
Yeah.
God accepted Abel's sacrifice, didn't accept Cain's. Cain gets mad.
Why did he
kills his
accept
brother.
one and not accept the other? It starts this whole tailspin that's going to affect everybody.
Everything.
I mean,
Going forward.
everything from that point forward, it's going to really be a large contributor, what I call the mucked up earth at this point. So, do we give our best to God, or do we give him the leftovers?
Yep. Yeah. So this is kind of where it comes down to. So often this is associated with tithing.
This is another one of my pet peeves. When everybody starts talking about tithing, it's not that I don't believe in a New Testament sense of tithing. It's that I don't think people understand the concept of what that means and what it encompasses to truly think of how to give that back in the sense of a re-giving of the gift.
So this ties back into grace. So the third grace of how do you repay the one who gave the gift to you.
Yeah.
So when we look at, I guess, tithing in the Bible, there were multiple, tithe means tenth, there were multiple tenths.
Yep.
So you got a tenth that was given to the temple to provide for the Levites, the priesthood. You had a tenth that you saved for the pilgrimage festivals to go party at the temple.
10% to party! Woo!
Yeah. You had another 10% that was given every 3 years for the storehouse.
Yeah.
And then when Israel rejected God and wanted their own king instead of God as their king, there was another tenth put on. So there's all these tenths.
Now there's even more than this, because then you get into, what if you owed something previously? What if the generations before you owed something? So I mentioned that in the case of Jacob and his brothers, they owed 1/5 of everything that they had back to Egypt for
20%.
how they gave them. So now, moving forward, this wasn't just them, it was the generations after them, and they could almost never repay that. That was like this constant bill, and when you and I think of things, we think of like, oh, I got a car payment for the next 5 years. And so that's where this comes in, and it gets way more complicated than that. But when people talk about just they're giving 10% back to God, I kind of want to roll my eyes and throw my head back and go, no, it's not 10%. And the typical Old Testament person, when they added up all these 10% or 20%, guess what they got to? Over 100% they owed. More than 100%. So people get this wrong because in the New Testament, it seems like Jesus is saying, I want all of you. I want everything that you are, even your worst, I'm going to refine and make your best. And people go, oh, but I thought it was only 10% in the Old Testament. And you kind of go, no, it was actually the other way around.
Yeah, so in the New Testament, Jesus talks to the Pharisees, and it's the only time tithing's really mentioned as tithing. You're given 10% of your dill, your cumin, all your spices. And Jesus says you neglect the weightier things.
Right.
So Jesus wants the weightier things. He wants all of our life. He just doesn't want our legalism.
Yeah.
So the whole thing behind it is the heart behind it, not that God is like, give me 10% or I'm not going to bless you. He's like, I want to bless you in giving up your whole life.
Yeah. And that's the form of korban that I talked about earlier that we have today. It's kind of this conformity within Christ. And Matt mentioned Jesus with the Pharisees, and he goes back to make this reference of Moses, you might remember, and they believed Christ that they were actually workers of iniquity, and so kind of encompasses the whole kingdom. And you might remember it's like this bearing fruit which they did not only by their mouth, again their nephesh, come in, and he said he would take all of this and appoint that so that they could go out and do this great work. And what was this great work? Every part of them reaching out to do the the mission that God had for them. Not just 10%, not just giving back of the leftovers or the things that they didn't want, but he wanted not only their best, but their worst. But not only their best and worst, everything in the middle. All of them. Everything that they had to offer.
So it's a whole biblical concept, and sometimes we just tie this to the New Testament, where we think that, oh, well, God just wanted 10% in there, and now he wants everything in the New Testament. No, it's everything always. God wants our everything. It's all his resources anyways, so I'm not saying you should give all your money to the church, but use your resources for God and seek him and how he wants you to worship with your money, with your resources, and everything like that.
Now, the part that I think our churches often do get right in our westernized thinking is they call this a living sacrifice. And that I love. When I hear people describe it that way, I go, yes, that's what it is. So how does this come back to worship?
So if you ask most people in church what part of the service is worship, they'll usually say the singing, right? And so I'm a worship leader at our church, and I'm one of the pastors there, and often we call that part where we sing together worship, and that's probably the biggest thing that most Westerners think of worship rather than a lifestyle, as we've been explaining in this video. But there's something special about singing and singing together, because a lot of these things, when you're living your life in your Nephesh, you're kind of doing this either with kind of your family or the people in your workplace, or that smaller groups, but not all believers kind of at the same time. The thing is, when you get in a room with believers and you're all singing to the Lord, it's a time in worship when you're all going in the same direction at the same time. And that's why I believe that music is so powerful. And it's such a powerful tool. And
it was in the Old Testament. You see it over and over. In fact, they won wars because of the musicians.
They got everybody going the same thing. And you see like drums and armies marching in that. It gets everybody going in the same direction. That's why I think worship and music is powerful, but it shouldn't be exclusive just to that. So when we come down to first fruits, how do we worship God with our time?
Your money.
Our job.
Marriage.
Our family.
It's Nephesh. All of who you are. Your life.
So it's a lifestyle.
In the Hebrew mindset, this is a little bit different than the way that we think today, because the way that we think today, we're kind of thinking that we're going to honor God in the way that we live life, so that when we get to church, we can praise and worship. And then the rest of the week is kind of just like these stacking up to make life work or to get money or all this stuff. Where the Jewish mindset that starts with this Nephesh thinking with God's children is that every single part of you, everything that you do is going to become your ministry in life. And so it doesn't stop at your vocation. If you're a woodworker, that's your ministry at the same time. And it doesn't start that if you go to the festival and your role at the festival is to pour the wine, then you do so as if that was your calling in life. That's what God is giving you right now. And if God blessed you with 200 acres of crops, at some point you're going to bless him back reciprocally by giving it back, however God shows you to do that.
So I guess one pet peeve of mine is when people say I'm coming to church to worship. So I'm coming to worship today. When our whole life is. So we should come to church worshiping.
Right.
It's
a vocation. And I love the word priest, In fact, people often wonder what a pastor is. I've been ordained since I've been 21 years old. I'm licensed by our state and everything else. But I don't work at a church like Matt does. And so people will often come and ask like if I can marry them or something like that. And they'll say, you're a pastor or something like that, And my belief is every believer is a priest. That's a better way to put it. And so
Peter
Jesus is a high priest. He's inside of me. It's my vocation now because I am one with God living in me. And every part of me is going to show that. So am I a pastor? Am I a reverend? Am I an elder? Am I a teacher? All these questions, they get complicated because of the evolution of words that Americans have made all this stuff. And I like to go back and just say, God has created me and my Nephesh to be a priest, to be a light bearer, to be a vocational person who's giving all of me, my Nephesh, through everything that I have, my first fruits, back to him.
All right, so let's recap. So the what of worship it's our vocation as priests, as you just said. It's an expression of gratitude and submission. And
why.
and it's a sacrifice.
Yep.
So the why is we worship God because of who God is and because of what he's given.
And the how.
Yep, the how is with our Nephesh and with our first fruits, the best of what we have in all of us.
So I hope that as you watch this video, you kind of start to see the way that the puzzle of the Bible ties in to who you are and the redemption, and I'll even call it rebirth that you've been given in God, that he wants to use every part of you, all of that he's given you, and it's this circular relational idea of grace that he's built into you, taking your best, your worst, and everything in between, and he's going to re-gift that through the kingdom of God. May God bless you and keep you.